It is one of the most bizarre and damaging episodes in the history of espionage. A story of idealism and incompetence, of political ambition and devastating betrayal. It's a story that starts with a series of mysterious bombings in Egypt, escalates into a political firestorm that topples a government, and ends, through a strange twist of fate, with the birth of a nuclear power. This is the story of a failed false flag operation, a mission so disastrous that for half a century, the state that ordered it refused to admit it even happened. In Israel, it's known by a grimly understated codename, Hisek Habish, the unfortunate business. But the world would come to know it as the Lavon affair. The year is 1954. The Middle East is a tinderbox. The new, charismatic leader of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, is consolidating power, his fiery Arab nationalism sending waves of anxiety through the young state of Israel. A critical negotiation is underway. Great Britain is planning to withdraw its 80,000 troops from the Suez Canal zone. For Israel, this is a strategic nightmare. The British presence was a buffer, and its removal, they feared, would leave them vulnerable to an emboldened Egyptian army. At the same time, the United States, under the Eisenhower administration, was warming to Nasser, encouraging the British withdrawal. Frustrated by diplomacy, a hardline faction within Israel's defense establishment decided to take matters into their own hands. They devised a secret, audacious, and deeply reckless plan: Operation Susanna. The plan was a classic false flag operation. Israeli military intelligence would use a secret cell of agents to plant bombs in American and British-owned civilian targets across Egypt, libraries, cinemas, and post offices. The attacks were designed to cause chaos, but no casualties. The bombs were timed to go off hours after the buildings were empty. The goal? To create an atmosphere of violence and instability that would be blamed on Egyptian extremists like the Muslim Brotherhood. This, they hoped, would achieve two things. First, convince the British that Nasser's government couldn't maintain order, forcing them to keep their troops in the Suez. And second, to sabotage the growing relationship between Egypt and the United States, proving Nasser was an unreliable partner for the West. It was a high-risk gamble, built on a stunningly naive assumption that a few small bombs could alter the course of global politics. It was a plan destined to fail. The agents chosen for this mission were not seasoned Israeli spies. They were a group of young, idealistic Egyptian Jews, recruited by an Israeli intelligence officer posing as a British businessman. These were people who felt like outsiders in their own country. They attended Jewish schools, spoke French more than Arabic, and felt a deep spiritual connection to the new state of Israel, a place most had never even seen. Driven by this fervent Zionism, they were smuggled into Israel for training in sabotage and photography, learning to build crude incendiary devices. The mission was codenamed Operation Susanna, whimsically named after the fiancée of one of the agents. They returned to Egypt as a sleeper cell, waiting for the signal to act. In the summer of 1954, the order came. The bombing campaign began. Small fires were set at a post office and bombs were detonated in the empty libraries of the United States Information Agency in Cairo and Alexandria. But on July 23rd, the entire operation unraveled in the most dramatic way possible. As one of the agents, Philip Nathanson, approached a cinema in Alexandria, the bomb in his pocket ignited prematurely, setting his clothes on fire. His public capture led Egyptian authorities straight to the rest of the network. The cell had been organized with shockingly poor security. All the members knew each other. Within days, the entire spy ring had collapsed. The operational failure in Egypt was just the beginning. Back in Jerusalem, a political firestorm was about to erupt, one that would rage for over a decade. The scandal centered on one explosive question: who gave the order? Two men stood at the heart of the storm. The Minister of Defense, Lavon, a powerful politician who swore he knew nothing about the operation, and the head of military intelligence, Colonel Binyamin Ghibli, who insisted he had received a direct verbal order from Lavon himself. Declassified transcripts of their confrontations reveal a bitter blame game. Lavon accused Ghibli of fabricating the story, telling him, "The whole story, the way you've told it to me, is a fabrication." Ghibli shot back, "To me one thing is clear. I, from your mouth, received the order to activate the squads. The truth remained buried for years, but the personal diary of David Ben-Gurion's military secretary Nehemiah Argov later revealed a stunning entry. Defense Minister Pinhas Lavon gave the order to activate the cell in Egypt. Argov added that this misguided and disastrous decision was made by the defense minister, not by the prime minister, who was kept completely in the dark. The affair became a proxy war within Israel's ruling Mapai party. On one side were the activists, loyal to the legendary David Ben-Gurion, who was temporarily in retirement. This camp included his ambitious protégés, Chief of Staff Moshe Dayan, and the Director General of the Defense Ministry, a young Shimon Peres. Both Dayan and Peres sided with the military, testifying against Lavon. On the other side was Prime Minister Moshe Sharett, a moderate who favored diplomacy, and had been pursuing secret peace talks with Egypt, talks the hardliners were desperate to sabotage. The Lavon affair successfully destroyed any chance of peace. The scandal was hidden from the Israeli public by strict military censorship. Newspapers that tried to report on it were published with large, empty white spaces where articles had been cut out. The affair could only be referred to in code, the unfortunate business. The political fallout was immense. Lavon was forced to resign in 1955. Prime Minister Sharett, his authority shattered, resigned later that year. Years later, when new evidence suggested Lavon had been framed with forged documents, Ben-Gurion himself would resign in protest, a move that fractured the Mapai party and changed Israeli politics forever. But while politicians fought for their careers in Jerusalem, the agents themselves faced a much darker fate. Their trial in Cairo was a public spectacle. They were tortured. One agent, Marcel Nino, the only woman in the group, was beaten so brutally she threw herself from a window in a suicide attempt. Another agent, Max Binet, who was in Egypt on a separate mission, took his own life in his cell. The verdicts were harsh. Two of the lead agents, Dr. Moshe Marzouk and Shmuel Azar, were sentenced to death and hanged. Others received long prison sentences from 7 years to life. For decades, the State of Israel officially denied any connection to the plot, abandoning the very people it had sent into danger. The survivors who were eventually released in prisoner exchanges were brought to Israel in secret and sworn to silence. And what of their handler, the man who sent them on the mission, Avri Elad? He was the only one who escaped Egypt. Suspicions immediately arose that he had betrayed the network. His behavior was bizarre. He lingered in Cairo for 2 weeks after the arrest, supposedly to sell his car. Years later, he was convicted in Israel on separate charges and jailed, but the suspicion that he was the third man who sold out his own agents has never gone away. It wasn't until 2005, 51 years after the failed operation, that Israel finally took responsibility, awarding the surviving agents certificates of appreciation for their service. The story doesn't end there. In one of history's greatest ironies, the failure of Operation Susanna set off a chain reaction that led to exactly what its planners wanted to avoid, a full-blown war. In the wake of the affair, Israel, now led by the returning hardliner David Ben-Gurion, launched a massive retaliatory raid on an Egyptian army base in Gaza. A humiliated Nasser, realizing his military weakness, turned to the Soviet bloc for weapons, signing a major arms deal with Czechoslovakia. This move infuriated the West. The United States and Britain pulled their funding for Egypt's Aswan High Dam project. In response, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. For Britain and France, this was the last straw. They secretly conspired with Israel to invade Egypt and retake the canal. In October 1956, the Suez Crisis began. The invasion was a military success, but a political disaster. The United States and the Soviet Union forced the invaders to withdraw in humiliation. The crisis marked the end of Britain and France as independent global superpowers. But it created an unintended and world-altering consequence. France, feeling betrayed by the United States and sharing a common enemy with Israel and Nasser, forged a deep secret alliance with the Jewish state. As part of this new partnership, France dramatically accelerated its clandestine assistance to Israel's nuclear program. French technology and expertise were essential in building the nuclear reactor at Dimona, giving Israel the ability to produce plutonium for atomic weapons. The ultimate irony of the Lavon affair is this: a botched false flag operation, designed to manipulate Western powers, not only failed, but inadvertently created the very conditions that allowed Israel to become a nuclear power. The road to the bomb began with a faulty explosive in a spy's pocket. The unfortunate business was a story of failure at every level. It shattered the lives of the agents who believed in the mission. It exposed the bitter rivalries and deceptions at the heart of Israel's founding generation. And it serves as a chilling reminder of how covert actions can spin out of control, with consequences far greater and more unpredictable than anyone could ever imagine. A secret plot to change history ended up doing just that, but in ways no one had planned. What do you think about the Lavon affair? Share your thoughts in the comments below and join the discussion. Let's talk about the lessons and impact of this extraordinary chapter in history.